What's going on, everybody? Josh Engleman for Awesemo.com, and I am back with my NFL DFS contenders, my top 5 at each position for DraftKings for week 1 of the NFL season. Now be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live, then head on over to Twitter, follow me, at Josh Engleman, only place you're going to get updates to these sims as we get closer to lock. Finally, let me know in the comments section who is your favorite at each position and your least favorite at each position that I'm about to share with you. We're showing the entire defense out of the gate. We've got the Falcons and the Broncos at the top, but I don't have enough to dig into defenses. That's going to be a little bit more random for me. What's not random is the sponsor of this show, No House Advantage. Peep the banner over here. Nope, I'm pointing the wrong direction. Over here, No House Advantage. Thank you so much for being the sponsor of the top 5s. But now it is time to dive into the action. Here are my top 5 tight ends. We round out the bottom of my top 10 with Robert Tonyan, Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett, and Anthony FIRKSER on the outside looking in. Now it's time for the 5 best tight ends for the main slate on Sunday. And as you can see by the optimal odds on some of these guys, it's going to blend in a lot at the bottom. So Logan Thomas, 4,600, projected for 10.5. Solid offense. Coin flip game with a 44.5 implied total. He's got a 7% chance of being in the optimal. Not very likely that he goes for 30 plus fantasy points. And it's basically a coin flip that he goes for 10 or less. Ultimately, when it comes to tight end, you're either paying up for the goods or you're crossing your fingers on a touchdown. We take a little bit of a step up for number 4, TJ Hawkinson. Only 4,900, which I think is appealing, but also not all that surprising considering he plays for Detroit. Tough matchup against San Francisco. Number 5 defense at PFF, so they're 7-point dogs, but a 9% chance of being in the optimal lineup. It's not too bad, honestly. But this is where we butter our bread at the tight end spot. We'll start at number 3, Kyle Pitts, 4,400, making his debut, projected just shy of 12 fantasy points for the Atlanta Falcons. They are projected as the number 11 offense. They've got a matchup against the number 12 defense in the Philadelphia Eagles. Slight favorites, 48-point total. You don't expect him to go totally bonkers. You don't really see that at tight end all that often. Well, maybe we'll see it for KELCE or KITTLE. We know who's next. 16% chance that Kyle Pitts is in the optimal lineup. He's the best option you can find if you're trying to pay down at tight end. If you're looking to stack him up with Matt Ryan, obviously that works as well. But if you need value at tight end, Kyle Pitts is your guy. If you want to go to sort of the middle tier, you're going to George Kittle, 6,300, projected just shy of 16 fantasy points. Big favorites against the Lions. This is the number 14 offense per PFF. They're the number 32 defense. That's how bad the Lions are. This is a really nice spot for Kittle. I expect big volume, and I expect one of the better scores you're going to find because George Kittle is in the optimal lineup at tight end 16% of the time, matching Kyle Pitts. But the number 1 guy is the guy with the biggest ceiling, and that would be Travis Kelce, 8,300, projected for 20 fantasy points. He gets a matchup against Cleveland. That's not easy, but they're still 6-point favorites with a 54.5-point game total. This is a high-level offense. It's a high-end defense, but it's also Travis Kelce, one of the best tight ends in the history of football. He's got an 11% chance of going for north of 30 fantasy points and a 16% chance of being in the optimal. So if you're playing tight ends, Kelce, Kittle, Pitts, those 3 guys are going to make up a large swath of your ownership. Depending on how much money you have in your lineup, you can go to any one of the 3. Rounding out the bottom of my top 10 wide receivers, we've got DK Metcalf, Corey Davis, AJ Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Marvin Jones Jr. We then move along to the number 5 spot. We talked about the tight end counterpart, but we go to number 5, Calvin Ridley. He's 7,900, projected for 20.5 fantasy points. That same matchup against the Eagles, slight favorites for Atlanta. It's nice that it's in Atlanta as well. Ridley's just balanced here. You know what you're getting. 11% chance of going for north of 30. 10% chance of going for less than 10. 14% chance overall of being in the optimal lineup. I'm just really happy to get to Ridley. He seems consistent. You know what you're getting out of that combo between Ridley and Matt Ryan. Don't overthink it. This feels like a really nice spot. Don't worry about the ownership. Just play some Calvin Ridley. This one is also quite obvious. Number 4, $8,300 Davante Adams. Green Bay Packers looking good. Aaron Rodgers back. He's not the host of Jeopardy right now. This game isn't actually in New Orleans. Got to move this bad boy. We're playing in Jacksonville. There's no Drew Brees here any longer. But we do have a really good Saints defense. So the matchup is a little difficult. But 50-point total. Packers are slight favorites, even on the road, although this is a neutral field game. Adams can go big here, and that's what we're worried about. Almost an 18% chance of going for north of 30 fantasy points. That matches his odds of being in the optimal lineup, 17%. A bust is going to be really hard for Adams, barring injury. He's just going to be too involved in the passing game. You really just need him to stay out of the end zone if this isn't a direction you want to go, but it's Davante Adams. All he does is score touchdowns. Slowly climbing the list of wideouts up to 19%. Our number 3, that's Stefon Diggs, projected for 20.5 fantasy points. He's 7,600. Buffalo gets a date with the Steelers. It's a really good defense, not all that great of an offense. But the Bills' offense, pretty quality, 7th overall. Big Josh Allen guy here too, by the way. 6.5-point favorites for the Bills in this one, and Diggs can go big. 15% chance of going north of 30. 19% chance of being in the optimal lineup. I love the upside of Stefon Diggs. I like the pairing with Josh Allen as well. We'll get to Allen in a bit, but there are plenty of worse ways to spend up than going to Stefon Diggs. But the 2 best options you're going to find this week at wideout are paydown options. $4,700 T. Higgins coming in the number 2 spot with a 23% chance of being in the optimal. Now, Cincinnati is going to be up in the air. They're probably not going to be great. We don't know what Burrow's going to look like after the knee injury. They're taking on a Minnesota team that's middle of the pack defensively, a Bengals offense that's slightly below the middle of the pack offensively. They're 3-point dogs, 47.5-point total, but the price tag on Higgins is right. I don't think he's going for north of 30. I don't think he's breaking the slate like that. But 23% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. That price tag is just too low for his expectations in the Bengals offense. So I like paying down for Higgins. I like paying down even more for my number 1. And that number 1 is $3,400 Marquez Callaway. We've got no Michael Thomas in this game. Drew Brees is gone. Insert Jameis Winston. There's going to be a lot of throwing here, one way or the other. He's projected for just short of 13 fantasy points in this matchup against Green Bay. Top 10 defense for Green Bay. Offense for the Saints is a giant shrug as far as I'm concerned. There's going to be monster upside from a fantasy perspective. I don't know how much that's going to correlate to winning, but at the very least, I don't think it matters. Callaway is going to be the number 1 guy out there until Michael Thomas gets back, and he's priced like he's a guy that might not play at all. This is a no-brainer to me. I'm locking him in cash games. 27% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Marquez Callaway is the number 1 wide receiver on DraftKings. Really flat running back odds this week, and we round out the top 10 with Austin Eckler, Chris Carson, Mike Davis, Aaron Jones, and James Robinson. Then we move on to number 5, which looks a lot like Robinson. There's not a lot of ambiguity at the running back spot this week. I'm a little surprised. I thought someone would just break free just because of how early these salaries came out, but honestly, it's a really difficult position for week 1. So we get to what feels like a pretty safe pay-up option in $9,100 Dalvin Cook, projected for 22. He's at Cincinnati. They're 3-point favorites with a 47-point total. It's a middle-of-the-pack offense. It's a middle-of-the-pack Bengals defense. We know how good Dalvin Cook is. We know what the upside is for Cook. 18% chance of going for north of 30. 14% chance of being in the optimal lineup altogether. I'll feel pretty safe going to Cook. He's certainly someone that I want to work in, but he's not really just a no doubt about it play. We're not seeing that in the backfield this week. If paying up for Cook isn't your cup of tea, pay down to $5,900 Antonio Gibson. 15-point fantasy projection for the football team taking on the Chargers. This game's a coin flip. The football team, boy, that's really hard to do, even a year later. 1-point favorites. It's a solid offense. They're 9th overall. Quite possibly one of the worst defenses in football for the Chargers, so that's going to help Gibson out quite a bit. You'd like to see the total be a little bit higher. You're not expecting big things out of Antonio Gibson. You're going to need a little touchdown luck, but the floor is there and he feels really safe. 15% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. Now at number 3, we've got Christian McCaffrey. He's 9,500, projected for 23 fantasy points. Gets a matchup against the Jets, a not very good team, though better on defense than they probably are on offense. Panthers, 4-point favorites. Crummy total, though, 44. This is one of the worst offenses in football. However, Christian McCaffrey, so long as he's on the field, is going to be involved in basically every play. Whether that's running the ball, whether that's catching the ball out of the backfield, or simply just lining up as a wide receiver, Christian McCaffrey is going to be everywhere. He's got a 24% chance of going north of 30 fantasy points. It's not like you would be surprised for him to have 10 catches, 200 yards, and some sort of touchdown. He's just that good. But at 9,500, there's a lot more efficiency that you can find elsewhere. I don't think he separates from the pack all that much. So much so that he's only third. Because you can just as easily go to $6,200 Joe Mixon. He's projected for about 17 fantasy points. He's matched up against the Minnesota Vikings. This game should be close. He should be involved the whole way. They're the number 19 offense, the number 15 defense for the Vikings. So it's an interesting spot. It's not a difficult matchup by any means. He has a little bit of an ability to hang a big number. Goes for 30 fantasy points 2% of the time, but he's in the optimal lineup 17% of the time. That's more than Christian McCaffrey. That's more than everybody on this list, except for my number one running back. And that number one running back is Alvin Kamara, and I am fascinated to see how this works out. 8,600 for Kamara, projected for 21.5 fantasy points. He's matching up against a pretty solid Packers defense, and we have no idea what to make of this Saints offense. I personally think that the added space that Jameis Winston will create by being able to throw the ball downfield will actually help. I was going to say hurt. Will actually help Alvin Kamara around the line of scrimmage. What's really going to be the main piece for this? Will Jameis Winston be looking to check down to Kamara? If he does, then I think Kamara is going to be in great shape because he's going to find a lot of space to move. And I think that will be very important. Think of this as like the NBA basketball and getting some spread so that you get more shooters attack the lane. That's what I'm expecting for Kamara. I'm expecting the length that Jameis provides to open up things wider for Kamara. 18% chance of going for north of 30 fantasy points. A 19% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. That right there sums up to the number one running back on the slate. And then we close it out with a quite flat quarterback position. You're grabbing these guys mostly in stacks, but we've got Russell Wilson, we've got Mac Jones, we've got Matt Ryan, Jalen Hurts, and Kyler Murray rounding out the bottom of my top 10. But honestly, you can kind of go any direction you want at quarterback this week, and it's not going to matter all that much. For example, you can pay down quite a bit to $4,800 Teddy Bridgewater, projected for 18, gets a date with the Giants, a not very good team. But it just so happens that Denver is also a not very good team, at least from an offense perspective. They might seem good from a DFS standpoint, but 28th via PFF. He's a 7% likelihood of being in the optimal. He's not going for 30 plus. He's probably not going for 10 or less. You're just going to find him straight down the middle. And I think that's fine if you're trying to play like a more balanced build. Or you can try and guess that Sam Darnold will be better this year. He's 5K, projected for 18 fantasy points. Matchup against the Jets, which is interesting. They're 4-point favorites, but it's a low total. This is another offense that doesn't grade out very well, 29th via PFF. It's a great matchup, however, against the Jets. But it's the same sort of situation as Bridgewater. You don't expect him to go for 30 plus. You don't expect him to totally tank. He's just going to exist in the middle of the pack. And at 5K, you can handle that. A lot of variance on this one for number 3, Joe Burrow, 5,700. Middle of the pack defense for the Vikings. But Burrow making his return after being injured. I obviously think that he pairs pretty well with T. Higgins. Could go big, but again, you're just expecting him to be in and around that 20 fantasy point mark. If the knee's feeling good, you expect more out of Burrow. Highly regarded coming out of college. If the knee's not great, this could be a real problem. I know the scar doesn't look good, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. At least for week 1, I am willing to take my chances on Joe Burrow. But now we get into the pay-up options, the guys that you think can go for big-time scores. First one up, number 2, Josh Allen, 7,400, projected for 24.5 fantasy points. Gets a really difficult matchup against a quality Steelers defense, but still, the Bills are favored, just shy of a 50-point fantasy total, or point total, rather, not fantasy total, point total. 13% chance of going for north of 30. You weren't seeing those numbers for Burrow or Darnold or Bridgewater. That's because Josh Allen offers a lot of potential touchdowns on the ground, and dude can sling it. Plus, pairing him with Stephon Diggs doesn't seem like it's all that difficult of a task. but only an 8% likelihood of being in the optimal lineup. That's how quarterback works. It's just going to naturally be a flatter experience. You're bringing your quarterback along for the ride with your wide receiver, not vice versa. And finally, we close it out with the obvious one, $8,100 Pat Mahomes. 6-point favorites against Cleveland, 54.5-point total. It's a tough matchup defensively, but still, he's Mahomes. He's unquestionably the number one quarterback in football. He goes for north of 30 fantasy points 24% of the time, but he's still only in the optimal lineup about 10% of the time. You love going to KELCE with him. That shouldn't be a problem at all. There's enough pay down options, particularly at wideout, that it makes it pretty easy. I'm not going to overthink it. On the surface, if you have the money, Pat Mahomes is the highest upside quarterback of the slate. Alrighty, folks, that will do it. Those are my NBA DFS contenders, my top 5 for week 1 in the NFL. Again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman. Go to No House Advantage and use the promo code Awesemo. And once again, thank you, No House Advantage, for being the sponsor of this show. Let me know in the comments section who you like and who you don't like. And catch me Sunday morning, twice, opening up the show, 9 a.m. with Adam Scher, and then closing it out for Live Before Lock from 12 to 1. You don't want to miss it. Good luck this Sunday for week 1 of the NFL season on DraftKings.